Most doctors rely on tools and training to read a patient's body. I hear the truth straight from the source. It is not a vague intuition, nor a fleeting gut feeling. It is clear, unfiltered, human-spoken voices echoing inside my ears, the distinct thoughts, frustrations, and agonies of every person's internal organs. Hearts complain of burnout and caffeine overload. Kidneys grumble from relentless overwork and neglect. Livers scream under the weight of hidden abuse and unspoken damage. Every organ has a personality. Every ache carries a story. And no patient can lie to me, no matter how convincing their words are. For 3 years, I've lived with this uncanny ability while working as a family medicine physician at a quiet suburban Austin primary care clinic. In all that time, I have never missed a symptom, overlooked a condition, or delivered a single misdiagnosis. This perfect medical intuition should be my greatest professional strength, yet it is my most dangerous secret. I hide it from every coworker, friend, and patient, perpetually terrified of being labeled mentally ill, losing my hard-earned medical license, or becoming a target of scrutiny in the tight, reputation-driven local medical community. The steady routine hum of clinic life is my safe haven. A predictable rhythm that lets me mask my strange gift and live a normal, unassuming life. My first patient of the afternoon was Tristan Walker, a 27-year-old man who shuffled slowly into exam room 3, his steps unsteady and wobbly, as if his legs could barely support his weight. He perched nervously on the padded exam table, his knee bouncing relentlessly, fingers twisting together in a tight, anxious grip. His face was creased with genuine, paralyzing fear, the kind of dread that comes from endless late-night internet self-diagnosis. He explained that his legs had grown increasingly clumsy and weak for weeks, that he'd lost sleep over the certainty that he was suffering from some rare, undetectable terminal illness no standard test could catch. He'd convinced himself his body was quietly failing him, waiting for a catastrophic break. Before I could even grab my pen to jot down his symptoms, his kidneys erupted in my ears, loud, sarcastic, and utterly exhausted from constant overexertion. This guy runs us into the ground nonstop. 8 girlfriends, 8 conflicting schedules, 0 consistent rest. We work harder than a farm plow horse 7 days a week with no break. I pressed my lips together to stifle a faint, incredulous smile, maintaining the calm, compassionate bedside manner I'd perfected over years. I ran through a full routine check, testing his reflexes, checking his muscle strength, asking targeted questions about his sleep, diet, and daily. True to form, Tristan dodged every lifestyle question, fixated entirely on his imagined terminal diagnosis. I wrapped up his visit with a prescription for basic vitamin and mineral supplements, then offered gentle, unmissable advice. Your body isn't failing from a illness. It's screaming for rest and balance. Slow down your chaotic schedule, prioritize consistent sleep, and practice basic time management. That's treatment. He stared at me in quiet eyes, finally processing the root of issues, and left the clinic with a weight of fear visibly lifting from shoulders. An hour later, Lila Marquez stepped into the exam room, the perfect picture of an overworked, high-achieving Austin corporate professional. Dressed in a crisp, tailored blazer and fitted slacks, her dark hair pulled into a tight, sleek ponytail, she carried herself with polished, unshakable confidence to the out. But I spotted the fine tremor in her hands and the faint tightness around her jaw the second. She rattled off her symptoms in a rushed tone. Persistent heart palpitations, random spells of lightheaded dizziness, sporadic shortness of breath that struck out of nowhere through the day. She was utterly convinced she suffered from undiagnosed congenital heart disease, insisting years of routine checkups had overlooked a life-threatening congenital defect lurked. The second she finished her anxious explanation, her heart burst into a frantic, exhausted rant inside my head. 3 iced Americanos every single morning, no breaks, no water, no rest. I'm overworked, overcaffeinated, and this woman acts shocked I'm struggling to keep up. I'm practically bouncing off her rib cages just steady. I checked vitals thoroughly. Blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels, all coming back almost perfectly normal, save for a mild caffeine-induced elevated pulse. I set down my stethoscope and offered a warm, reassuring smile, cutting through her certainty. There's no sign of congenital heart disease here. Your heart's just burned out from constant caffeine overload. Swap your afternoon coffee for chamomile tea, cut back on iced Americanos, and prioritize slow, calm moments. Skeptical but willing to try, Lila followed faithfully. 2 weeks later, she returned to the clinic with glowing, Healthy skin and steady energy, handing me a small framed appreciation banner, grateful for the simple life fix that had cured stress. By mid-afternoon, my stack of routine appointments had fully wrapped up, and the busy clinic faded into a soft, quiet lull. The chatter from the waiting room dimmed, the constant beep of check-in machines quieted, and only the familiar hum of overhead light hallways. My closest coworker and clinic manager Mia Carter poked her head gently through the exam room door, her tone quiet and subtly urgent, unlike her usual demeanor. New high-priority patient just checked in, Claire Bennett. She's a top political lobbyist, super well-connected in Texas state circles. Upper management wants this visit perfect, so keep things professional and smooth, okay? I nodded silently, taking the thick, newly printed patient chart from her hands, my curiosity piqued by the unspoken pressure in her voice. Moments later, the exam room door clicked shut with a soft final sound, and stepped inside. Tall, poised, and immaculately dressed, she carried an air of quiet power and practiced composure, her expression unreadable. But the second she crossed the threshold, a raw, desperate, terrified scream exploded in my ears. Louder, more frantic, and more urgent than any organ voice I'd ever heard in years of practice. Her liver trembled relentlessly inside her body, screaming a single looping panic that sent a sharp chill down my spine. This is not routine. This is dangerous. Something is very, very wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stayed raised the second Claire Bennett settled onto the exam table. Every patient's organs carried their own tone, weary, snappy, lazy, even dramatic, but nothing had ever matched the unbridled terror roaring from her liver. It wasn't the dull, chronic burnout I was used to seeing in overworked professionals or casual drinkers. This was sharp, frantic fear, the kind that came from ongoing, unrelenting damage she was actively hiding. I schooled my features into the neutral, attentive expression I'd mastered over years of clinical work, picking up my tablet to pull up her patient profile, my fingers moving steady, even as my pulse thrummed in my ears. Claire rested her hands neatly in her lap, her posture flawless, every movement calculated and controlled. Mid-30s, immaculately styled, no visible flaws or nervous tells to the casual observer. As a top Texas lobbyist, she'd spent decades mastering the art of public composure, and it showed. She launched into her symptoms with practiced precision, her voice smooth and even, no tremor, no hesitation. "I've been dealing with persistent fatigue for months," she explained, her gaze steady on mine. Occasional dull abdominal cramping, brain fog, and random episodes of lightheadedness. "I've cut back on work hours, adjusted my sleep schedule, and nothing's improving. I need clearance for a critical out-of-state policy summit next week. My team can't afford for me to miss." I nodded, jotting generic notes on my screen to maintain the appearance of a standard consultation, while her liver screamed over every word she spoke. Lies. All of it. She's not resting. She's masking. Pills at night, liquor after every meeting, one right after another. I'm drowning slowly, and she's pretending nothing's wrong. The voice was hoarse, exhausted, bordering on desperate, a stark contrast to Claire's icy, collected demeanor. I pressed gently, following clinical protocol, probing for the hidden root of her distress. "Have you noticed any changes to your diet or alcohol intake lately? Any new medications, sleep aids, or supplements you've started taking without a prescription?" A flicker of faint irritation crossed her face, fast enough that anyone without my hyper-attuned awareness would have. "I drink socially, very moderately. No prescription drugs, no unregulated supplements. Just standard work stress, doctor. I'm here for a solution, not a lifestyle." Her tone turned firm, bordering on dismissive, a quiet reminder of her status and influence. She was not here to be questioned. She was here to be cleared, quickly and without push. I kept my tone calm and non-confrontational, careful not to alienate her while still pushing past her walls. Fatigue and abdominal distress rarely stem from stress alone. Our bodies hold on to cumulative strain, especially when we're overworking and self-medicating to keep up. I'd like to run a full metabolic panel and liver function tests to rule out underlying issues before I clear you. The second the words left my mouth, her entire demeanor shifted. Her polite smile tightened, her jaw set, and her posture stiffened with unspoken. "That's unnecessary," she said flatly. "I had full blood work done at a private boutique clinic 3 months ago. Everything was perfect. I don't have time for redundant testing and delayed results. I just need a standard wellness note confirming I'm fit to try." Her heart chimed in then, quieter but just as truthful as her liver. She hates tests, hates paper trails, hates anything that might put her habits on record. She's not scared of being sick. She's scared. I felt the weight of the situation settle heavy chest. This was no longer a simple patient consultation. Claire wasn't avoiding tests out of busyness or anxiety. She was avoiding it. I could feel it in the tremor of her internal organs, in the frantic urgencies. She was hiding something big, something that could unravel her career, her reputation, and possibly the political circle it in. Still, I couldn't explain my reasoning without exposing my impossible secret. I was trapped working half-blind, limited to standard clinical questions and visible evidence while knowing the full truth. Before I could formulate a gentle compromise, the exam room door tapped open softly. Mia leaned in, her expression tight and guarded, eyes flicking briefly to Claire before landing on me. Sorry to interrupt. Dr. Hale would like a quick ride. I excused myself, step out quiet hallway. The clinic's soft background noise muffled conversation. Dr. Nathan Hale, the clinic's senior partner, stood by the nurse's station, his expression serious and unyielding. Claire Bennett is a major asset to local medical advocacy, he said low, urgent. No room for argument in his tone. She's got direct access to state healthcare funding policy decisions. Do not overcomplicate her visit. Give her the clearance note she needs, keep it simple, and don't push unnecessary testing. We can't afford to alienate someone with her influence. I stared at him, stunned by his willingness to prioritize connections over patient safety, my mind racing with the unspoken truth I alone held. She's hiding significant liver strain, I argued quietly. Her symptoms aren't work stress. She's self-medicating heavily, and traveling will only make it worse. Ignoring this could be in critical condition. Dr. Hale's expression hardened. We practice evidence medicine here, Elara, not speculation. You have no test results, no official proof, only intuition. Write the note. That's an order. He turned and walked away before I could reply, me frozen in the hallway, caught between my professional security. I stepped back into the exam room, the weight of my crushing down on me. Claire looked up, already knowing the unspoken battle, a faint glint in her eyes. I drafted the basic track clearance note she demanded, printing it off and handing it to her without another word. She folded it neatly and slipped it into her designer leather folder, tone cool and cordial. Thank you, Dr. Voss. Appreciate your flexibility. She left the clinic minutes later, and I sank down into my desk chair, hands shaking faintly. I'd spent 3 years holding perfect ethical care, never compromising a patient's safety, never cutting corners. Today, I'd been forced to look the other way while a high-risk patient walked out the door, dangerous secret unchecked. Minutes after her car pulled out of the clinic parking lot, my phone vibrated on the desk. A text from an unknown number popped up on my screen, short and deliberate. A small token of appreciation for your discretion. Expect a gift card in your clinic mailbox by end of day. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a thank you. It was a bribe, a quiet, clear message. Claire Bennett wasn't just hiding a health crisis. She was used to buying silence, and she just marked me as someone she could easily influence. The safe routine clinic life I clung to for 3 years was gone, and I knew with chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. I stared at the unknown text on my phone screen long after the screen dimmed to black, my fingers still hovering over the glass like I could erase the message simply by refusing to reply. Every part of me hated the quiet implication behind those words. It was not gratitude. It was a line being drawn, a subtle reminder that Claire Bennett operated in a world where favors were bought, debts were recorded, and silence could be purchased with a simple gift card. 3 years of clean, uncompromised medical practice had just been tainted by a single unethical transaction, and the thought curdled sharp and bitter in my chest. Without hesitation, I typed out a short, firm reply, declining her so-called token of appreciation, making sure to leave no room for ambiguity. I do not accept gifts for standard patient care. Please refrain from sending anything further. My services are based on medical protocol, not discretion. I locked my phone and slid it into my desk drawer, but the tension lingering in my shoulders refused to ease. For the first time in my career, I had knowingly signed off on a medical clearance that did not match the body's unspoken truth. Claire's organs had screamed abuse and deterioration, yet I'd bowed to clinic pressure and political influence to grant her travel approval. That compromise left me restless and guilt-ridden, unable to fall back on the perfect, unblemished record I'd always prided myself on. I could no longer pretend this was a routine patient interaction. This was a risk, one that would only grow bigger the longer I chose to ignore it. Determined to regain control of the situation through legitimate, ethical means, I pulled Claire's full medical record onto my tablet the second the clinic quieted down for the evening. I scrolled through every note, every past visit, every minor lab result on file, searching for any baseline data I could use to build a formal case for further testing. If I could gather tangible, clinical evidence to back up what I'd heard from her organs, I would no longer be relying on unexplainable intuition. I could confront Dr. Hale, justify my concerns, and mandate the screenings Claire was so desperate to avoid. I needed proof, ordinary, acceptable, human proof, to protect both her safety and my professional integrity. The next morning, I sent a formal patient portal message to Claire, professionally requesting she schedule follow-up lab work within 48 hours. I framed it as routine post-consultation care, standard for patients presenting with unexplained chronic fatigue and abdominal symptoms, leaving no opening for her to argue it was unnecessary or excessive. Within 10 minutes, her reply landed in my inbox, sharp, clipped, and openly hostile. She stated flatly that she had no intention of wasting time on redundant tests, accused me of overstepping professional boundaries, and claimed my persistent probing was unprofessional and harassing. Her defiance was unmasked now. She no longer bothered with polite pretenses. Dr. Hale caught wind of the back and forth before I could prepare a defense, pulling me into his office during the midday. His tone was stern, his expression unyielding, his priority crystal clear. "You need to drop this, Lara. You pushed her yesterday, she complied with your visit, and you signed her clearance. Continuing to press her will only make the clinic look unprofessional and obsessive. Claire Bennett is a powerful ally. We don't burn bridges with people who shape state healthcare." I leaned forward, my voice steady but urgent, refusing to back down entirely. "I'm not burning bridges. I'm practicing medicine. Her body is failing her, and she's actively hiding the cause. If she travels and suffers a crisis on that trip, every liability falls on us because we cleared her without problem." He waved off my concerns with an impatient shake of his head, dismissive of every warning I gave. Liability lies in unnecessary medical overreach, not routines. "Stand down," that order. The conversation ended there, leaving me cornered, powerless, my professional judgment overridden by clinic politics and corporate self-interest. The stress of being trapped between my oath, my job, and a dangerous patient's denial crashed over me all at once. My hands trembled slightly as I left his office, my breath coming shallow and fast. The first faint stirrings of a panic attack coiling tight in my chest after years of steady, unflappable. I barely registered the soft sound of the front door opening until a familiar voice pulled me out of my spiral. Javier Ruiz, a local paramedic and regular clinic patient, had stopped by for his quarterly. He noticed my tense posture and pale face immediately, his easy, warm demeanor soft concern. "You look burnt out." "Rough week?" he asked casually, leaning against the nurse's station. I forced a thin smile, brushing off my state as typical clinic fatigue, too exhausted and guarded to explain the impossible weight I was carrying. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, sharp and observant, like he could tell my stress ran far deeper schedule. Shortly after Javier's visit, my clinic portal pinged with a preliminary lab preview alert, one I'd requested from Claire's outside testing. Filed under standard medical record collaboration, even the partial 3-month data was damning. Her liver enzyme levels were already mildly elevated, her metabolic markers inconsistent with the perfect health she'd claimed. Numbers didn't scream, not like her organs did, but they confirmed every word I'd heard. She was deteriorating slowly, and deliberate ignorance, paired with her dangerous medication habits, the damage. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the screen, realizing the full scale of my dilemma. I was no longer dealing with speculation or supernatural intuition. I had official, verifiable proof that Claire was lying about her health. Proof that Dr. Hale was willfully ignoring to protect the clinic's reputation and connections. The safe, neutral life I'd spent 3 years building no longer an option. If I continued to obey orders and stay silent, I would be complicit in letting a high-risk patient walk toward a potentially fatal health crisis. If I pushed back too hard, I risked losing it for. The chapter closed with me staring at the faint red warning markers on the lab report, understanding finally settling in. Neutral was no longer possible. I would have to choose sides, and whatever choice I made would carry irreversible, altering consequences. The red-tinged lab markers burned bright on my screen long after I'd minimized the window, a quiet, unshakable truth lingering in the back of my mind. Claire Bennett was lying about her health. Her body was steadily deteriorating, and I possessed tangible proof that no one in charge cared to acknowledge. Dr. Hale's order to stand down wasn't just a professional suggestion. It was a firm line in the sand, forcing me to choose between my career and my medical oath. For the first time in my 3 years of practice, I felt utterly alone in a clinic full of coworkers, trapped between hard evidence, institutional apathy, and a powerful patient's deliberate denial. I'd hoped the preliminary lab data would be enough to justify my persistence, to make someone see that my concerns were not overreach or obsession, but legitimate patient safety advocacy. But clinic politics operated by its own set of rules, ones that prioritized influence and reputation over the quiet, unglamorous work of protecting people from themselves. I spent the rest of the afternoon replaying my confrontation with Dr. Hale, my frustration simmering into quiet helplessness. I couldn't explain how I'd known Claire was hiding severe self-abuse before the lab results confirmed it. My gift was my greatest strength, but also my biggest prison, leaving me unable to defend my own clinical judgment without ruining my life. By closing time, my stress had curdled into desperate restlessness. I found Mia restocking front desk supplies, the clinic empty and quiet without the usual rush of patients and staff chatter. She'd been my closest work friend for years, steady, practical, and always willing to have my back during chaotic shifts. I'd never hidden minor work frustrations from her, and I craved even a small amount of normal validation to calm my racing thoughts. I kept my explanation vague, careful to leave out any mention of my supernatural ability, framing the conflict as a difficult, high-status patient and unreasonable clinic leadership. I've got a patient who's clearly unwell, lying about her symptoms and refusing necessary follow-up care, I told her, leaning against the reception counter, my voice low and tired. I have lab data that proves she's deteriorating, but Dr. Hale is forcing me to back off entirely to protect a political connection. It feels like we're abandoning patient safety for clinic faith. Mia paused what she was doing, offering me a sympathetic frown, but her response was far more pragmatic than I'd hoped for. I get how frustrating that is, she said gently. But high-profile patients are always messy. Maybe you are pushing a little too hard. Doctors fix what patients let them fix. If she's refusing, there's only so much you can do without crossing. Her words landed heavier than I expected. It wasn't criticism, but it was disbelief. The first crack in the easy, unwavering trust we'd shared for years. Mia didn't see the crisis I saw. She only saw a physician overworking herself over a stubborn client, overcomplicating a standard case to feed her own perfectionism. I tried to push further, to explain that this wasn't routine, that Claire's condition was actively dangerous, but I had no way to articulate the depth of the crisis without exposing my secret. I was forced to fall silent, biting back every unspoken truth burning in my chest. That quiet, unresolvable gap in understanding created a subtle but permanent distance. I pulled back from the conversation, forcing a tired smile and letting the top. In that moment, I realized I could not confide in the only person I'd trusted at work. She would never understand why I was certain, why I refused to let the case go. To her, I was overreacting. To me, I was watching someone walk toward harm while everyone around me. While I hesitated, Claire seized. Early the next morning, she replied to my portal message once more, her tone icy and she formalized her complaint, stating she would be documenting my unwarranted clinical pressure in her file, and hinted that she would be reconsidering her ongoing support for local healthcare advocacy partnerships linked to our clinic. The underlying threat was clear: continue pushing, and she would damage the clinic's reputation and funding opportunities to make. I second-guessed every choice I'd made over the past 4 years. Maybe Mia was right. Maybe my certainty, born from a gift no one else could comprehend, had made me reckless. Maybe I'd let my hatred of compromise push me to overstep professional boundaries. I began to question my own judgment for the first time in my career, wondering if I'd let my secret ability warp perspective, turning a difficult but standard patient case into. Mid-morning, while I was buried in routine checkups, Claire's body spoke to me again, clearer and more than before. Her liver continued its exhausted screaming, cycling through the familiar pain of alcohol and of abuse, but her lungs whispered a newer, quieter secret I hadn't detected until that moment. She's not the only one. She's covering for someone else, sharing the pills, hiding the drinking, taking the fall to keep a bigger name from collapsing. The revelation stopped cold mid-exam, my mind reeling with the new, unforeseen conflict. I'd assumed Claire's secrecy was purely self-serving, an influential woman protecting her own patient and career. But her organs now revealed a far larger, more dangerous truth. Her denial, her self-medication, her refusal of treatment were not just for herself. She was shielding another person, someone powerful enough to require her to risk her own health and credibility. All my previous assessments, all my careful planning, all my attempts to resolve the situation had been based on incomplete information. I'd been fighting half a problem this entire time, blind to the real stakes hide us. By the end of the day, I sat alone in my office, the weight of my miscalculation down on me. I'd alienated my closest friend, defied my boss, drawn the wrath of a powerful lobbyist, and still failed to grasp the scope of the crisis. My attempts to regain control had only left me more isolated, more vulnerable, and more outmatched than before. The situation was far bigger than a single patient's hidden health struggles. It was a cover-up, one I'd only just uncovered, and I now stood alone in its crosshairs with no allies, no clear path forward, and no proof of the full truth. The realization that Claire Bennett was covering for someone else rewrote every rule of the case. For days, I'd framed this conflict as a one-sided battle with a stubborn, privileged patient hell-bent on destroying her own body for the sake of vanity and career status. But my newly uncovered truth changed everything. Claire's self-neglect was not random self-destruction. It was collateral damage. She was burning herself out to absorb someone else's vice, shielding a more powerful figure from public ruin and professional fallout. The second her lungs whispered that secret, I knew I was no longer dealing with a private health crisis. I was tangled up in a political cover-up with stakes, far beyond a single patient's liver enzymes. I spent my lunch break holed up in my quiet back office, scrolling through local political news and state healthcare policy archives on my work laptop, moving carefully to avoid triggering any clinic system activity logs that could flag my research. I kept my search discreet, no names typed outright, only vague queries about recent state policy summits, political advocacy firms, and high-profile state-level campaigns operating in Austin. Claire's job as a lobbyist placed her in direct contact with senators, campaign directors, and corporate policy leaders, men and women with enough influence to crush a small-town family doctor without a second thought. Piecing the puzzle together took less time than I wanted it to. Claire's firm was the primary advocacy partner for a statewide healthcare reform campaign, one that had been dominating local headlines for months. The campaign's lead chair was a well-respected state senator with a pristine public image, a family-focused platform, and a zero-tolerance stance on substance abuse in public office. To the public, he was untouchable. But the math fit too perfectly. A powerful man with a reputation to protect, a loyal lobbyist willing to self-medicate and lie on his behalf, and a quiet pattern of hidden excess that required constant covering. My stomach twisted with dread as I connected the dots. Claire's nightly liquor and sedative use wasn't just her own coping mechanism. She was cleaning up someone else's mess, consuming the same substances to normalize the scent, to explain away empty bottles, to absorb the blame whenever suspicion. Every lie she'd told me, every test she'd refused, every threat she'd issued to protect her secrecy was never just for herself. She was safeguarding an entire political campaign, and by extension, the careers of dozens of powerful. It didn't take long for Claire to sense my quiet. She'd spent years navigating political warfare, and she recognized a curious, persistent threat the second I strayed beyond her individual health. By midday, the quiet pushback started. A local medical networking forum I'd been part of for years began lighting up with subtle, unmarked comments about unstable clinic staff and overzealous physicians crossing professional boundaries. The rumors vague, deniable, but planting quiet doubt about my judgment among local medical. At first, I thought I was imagining it, paranoia spurred by my isolated stress. But when Mia pulled me aside between patient visits, her expression tight and certain, I knew the whispers had spread beyond anonymous online threads. Heard some weird chatter from a few clinic partners downtown, she said, lowered. People are saying you've been fixated on a high-power patient, pushing unnecessary testing, refusing to drop a case after the patient explicitly declared. They're calling it unprofessional, borderline. Her tone was neutral, not accusatory, but the doubt in her eyes cut deep. The small crack in our trust from days prior had widened into an rift. I wanted to defend myself, to scream that I wasn't obsessive, that I was chasing a buried truth no one else could see. But I had no proof, no logical explanation, no way to justify my certainty without exposing my impossible gift. I could not tell her I heard organs confessing cover-ups, that I knew secrets no blood test or exam could uncover. So I stood silent, forcing a calm smile that didn't reach my eyes, and told her it was nothing but miscommunication and The lie landed heavy between us, and I watched her pull back, her trust in me further. That evening, after the clinic closed and the halls fell quiet, the anonymous started. My personal cell buzzed once, ID. I answered, but only dead silence hummed on the other end before out. Minutes later it rang again. Same result. No voices, no threats, just quiet, unrelance. It was a message without words. They were watching me. My home number, my personal schedule, my private life, nothing more. I locked my office door, heart pounding, and pulled up Claire's full file time. Her liver's quiet, constant panic echoed faintly in the back of my skull, a low, exhausted chant. He's spiraling. I can't keep covering for him forever. I'm going to fail, and we're both going down. The words confirmed every suspicion I'd pieced together. The cover-up was fraying at the edges. The senator's substance abuse was worsening. Claire's body was breaking down under the weight of covering for him, and the entire fragile facade was collapsing. What terrified me most was my position in all of it. I was a lone physician with unprovable knowledge, standing between a corrupt political machine and its carefully curated public image. Dr. Hale cared only about the clinic's reputation. Mia was beginning to doubt my sanity. Powerful people were already smearing my professional name and monitoring my cut me down. By nightfall, sitting alone in my dim office with only my screen's blue glow lighting the room, I understood the full brutal story crisis. What began as a routine patient consultation had exploded into a political scandal capable of ending my career, ruining my reputation, and costing me everything I'd built. I was no longer just fighting for a patient's health. I was fighting to keep myself from being buried alive by a cover-up that would destroy any who would uncover the truth. The anonymous silent calls bled into my nights and seeped into my days, a constant unspoken threat that clung to every quiet moment. I stopped answering unknown numbers entirely, yet the damage was already done. I could no longer pretend this was just a messy patient dispute or a clinic politics misunderstanding. I was up against a calculated cover-up, and the people behind it were willing to tarnish my name, invade my privacy, and pressure my workplace to silence me for good. Every support system I'd relied on for 3 stable years was crumbling fast, leaving me isolated in the eye of the storm. The first official crackdown hit early Monday morning. Dr. Hale pulled me into his conference room before the clinic doors even opened, a formal internal review form laid flat across his desk. His face was cold, unyielding, stripped of any previous casual professionalism. "Multiple anonymous complaints have been filed against you," he stated bluntly. Claire Bennett's office flagged unprofessional fixation, boundary overreach, and unwarranted patient harassment. Local medical network peers have submitted secondary observations regarding your inconsistent bedside judgment. The clinic is opening a formal internal inquiry to protect our licensing and community standing. My chest tightened instantly. I'd braced for pushback, for warnings, for disciplinary talks, but a formal review was career-altering. It would go on my permanent professional record, follow me through every future job application, credential check, and medical board evaluation. This is retaliation, I argued firmly. I refused to overlook her dangerous health decline. I refused her bribe. And now she's manufacturing complaints to ruin me. Dr. Hale shook his head, unswayed. His priority solely the clinic's survival. Intent doesn't matter. Elara, documentation does. You pursued repeated testing a competent patient declined. You continued follow-up outreach after a formal request to cease contact. On paper, this is unprofessional conduct. My job is to protect this clinic, not defend your personal judgment against powerful clients. His words were final, and I heard the unspoken truth loud and clear. He would sacrifice my career without hesitation to keep the clinic's reputation and political connections intact. Worse, Mia was assigned to handle the review paperwork. As clinic manager, she was required to compile all message logs, patient notes, and follow-up records for the investigation file. She found herself trapped between policy and friendship, forced to gather evidence that could end my... I saw the guilt in her eyes every time she stepped into my office, but she had no choice. Corporate protocol left no room for loyalty. "I don't want to do this," she told me quietly, voice tight with frustration. "But if I refuse, I lose my job too. There's no middle ground." I didn't blame her, but the distance between us turned permanent in those moments. The last person I'd trusted at work could no longer stand beside me. I was completely alone, fighting a system that protected corruption and punished accountability. The weight of it crashed over me all at once. Months of suppressed stress, unspoken secrets, forced compromises, and relentless intimidation finally breaking my steadier. That night, alone in my quiet apartment, I broke down completely. For 3 years, I'd carried my organ-hearing gift in silence, never letting myself crack, never indulging fear or self-pity. I'd built my entire identity on being the calm, reliable, flawless doctor with a record. But now my reputation was under attack, my career hanging by a thread, and I held damning, unprovable truth that no one would believe. I could keep pushing forward and everything, or I could stay silent and let Claire and the senator's destructive cover-up continue. In the lowest moment, I forced myself to stop fixating on what I'd lost. I lost administrative support, lost workplace trust, lost professional credibility in local circles, and lost the safety of my quiet life. But in that empty, hopeless space, I found a clear path forward I'd missed before. I didn't need clinic politics or leadership approval to protect patient safety. I didn't need Dr. Hale's permission, or Mia's backing to follow medical protocol. I needed outside, unbiased help. Someone bound by different rules. Someone who prioritized public safety over reputation. I thought immediately of Ruiz, the paramedic who'd visited the clinic weeks prior, who noticed my burnout, who worked within the county's emergency and substance abuse response network. He operated outside clinic hierarchy, outside political lobby influence, and had direct access to legitimate, confidential patient safety protocols I could leverage without exit. By the end of the night, my fear had hardened into unshakable resolve. I was no longer fighting to preserve my easy, stable life. I was fighting to expose the truth, to stop the escalating damage of a political cover-up, and to save Claire from self-destruct before her body, or the senator's scandal, completely. All my soft boundaries, my conflict avoidance, my desperate desire for normalcy were gone. I was ready to fight back, even if I had to stand alone. The morning after I'd hardened my resolve felt different. The fog of fear that had clung to me for weeks finally lifted, replaced by sharp, unwavering focus. I was no longer a passive victim of clinic politics and wealthy retaliation. I had a clear goal: build an ironclad, fully documented patient safety case, strip away Claire's layer of political protection, and stop the cover-up before it destroyed multiple lives. Every move I made from this point would be calculated, legal, and untraceable to my hidden ability. No intuition, no speculation, only hard, admissible medical evidence. Before the clinic opened, I texted Javier a brief, anonymized request for a quick consultation. I kept the message strictly professional, avoiding any sensitive details that could be flagged or traced. I framed it as a complex patient case involving possible substance abuse and masked health deterioration, asking for guidance on state-mandated patient safety protocols and confidential intervention pathways. Javier replied within minutes, agreeing to meet me during his midday break, away from the clinic's surveillance and office gossip. Our meeting was short, discreet, and game-changing. Sitting in a quiet roadside coffee shop miles from Austin's political and medical circles, Javier walked me through the exact legal safeguards I'd been missing. He explained that physicians are protected by state patient safety laws, even against high-profile clients. I was legally allowed to document suspicious health decline, flag at-risk patients for mandatory follow-up screenings, and file confidential third-party safety referrals, all without clinic leadership approval. Most importantly, these official filings created a legally binding paper trail that shielded me from retaliatory misconduct claims. Javier also confirmed my unspoken suspicion. Powerful local figures often used clinic connections and reputation pressure to avoid substance abuse accountability. He warned me that political cover-ups always unravel from small, overlooked inconsistencies, and that thorough, consistent documentation was the only foolproof way to break through their influence. He offered to connect me with a neutral third-party substance abuse specialist who accepted anonymous patient safety referrals. completely outside the reach of Claire's network and Dr. Hale's clinic jurisdiction. Armed with this actionable plan, I returned to the clinic and began rebuilding my case from the ground up. Over the course of the day, I compiled every legitimate detail: Claire's self-reported symptoms, her repeated refusal of medically necessary testing, her conflicting wellness claims, her abnormal prior lab markers, and the pattern of her evasive follow-up behavior. I wrote every note in strict clinical language, eliminating all personal opinion, emotion, or intuitive judgment. Every entry was rooted solely in observable patient behavior and official medical records, leaving no room for accusations of unprofessional fixation. Claire sensed my shift in attitude immediately. Days prior, I'd been hesitant, defensive, and easy to pressure. Now I was calm, methodical, and unyielding, operating strictly within medical protocol and refusing to engage with her subtle. She called the clinic midday, her tone sharp and impatient, demanding I close her case file entirely and drop all pending follow-up requests. When I politely cited state patient safety guidelines and informed her mandatory screening was non-negotiable for symptomatic high-risk patients, her composure fractured for the time. Her voice turned cold and threatening. "You're digging a hole for yourself, doctor. No local clinic, no medical board, no political ally will side with you over this. Drop this now, or your career in Austin medicine." The threat was explicit, unmasked, final. But it no longer terrified me. I'd already built my guards. I'd locked in my legal protection, established my official portrayal, and cut off every avenue for her to falsely discriminate. Minutes after the call ended, I overheard her talking in a heated, hushed voice on a secondary line while reviewing her patient. Though I could not hear the other speaker, her frustrated tone thing. "I can't keep covering for your mistakes forever. My health is on the line, and this doctor..." For the first time since this deal began, Claire was not in control. The fragile alliance between her and the unnamed senator was fraying. Her loyalty was cracking under the weight of sacrifice, and her perfect cover-up was finally showing fatal flaws. By the end of the day, I submitted my first confidential safety referral to the independent specialist Javier recommended. The filing was anonymous, legally protected, and fully backed by verified medical documentation. I had officially moved from defense to offense. Claire could smear my reputation, pressure my boss, and threaten my career, but she could no longer erase the official, state-recognized evidence of her health neglect. The chapter closed with a shift in power. For weeks, I'd been hunted, isolated, and forced to compromise. Now I held the legitimate system-backed leverage. The tape had finally turned, and Claire's carefully constructed world of lies and political protection was beginning to crumble inside out. My confidential safety referral set irreversible events into motion overnight. The independent medical specialist's office reached out to our clinic first thing in the morning, requesting formal collaboration on Claire's high-risk health case and flagging potential substance-induced organ damage for official state medical follow-up. The request landed directly on Dr. Hale's desk, unignorable, legally documented, and impossible to dismiss as personal obsession or physician overreach. For the first time, the conflict was no longer confined to private threats and workplace gossip. It was formal, regulated, and tied to state patient safety protocol. Dr. Hale summoned me to his office within minutes, his usual composed demeanor replaced with unmasked panic. He stared at the official referral letter like it was a burning contract, his jaw tight with frustration. "You went around me. You took this outside clinic protocol and involved third-party regulators without my approval." His voice was sharp, accusatory, but I did not flinch. I had anticipated this reaction and prepared my response strictly around legal and medical obligation, leaving no room for political argument. "I followed state patient safety law," I replied evenly. "A symptomatic patient with progressive organ decline and repeated refusal of necessary testing qualifies for mandatory external intervention. My documentation is complete, compliant, and fully admissible." I had no ethical or legal grounds to dismiss a clear health risk. I laid my full case file on his desk, page after page of time-stamped notes, prior lab abnormalities, patient refusal records, and symptom logs. Every detail was factual, unemotional, and bulletproof. Dr. Hale scanned the documents rapidly, his anger fading into quiet realization. He could no longer defend Claire or dismiss my concerns without exposing the clinic to massive legal liability and regulatory scrutiny. His political protection of the lobbyist had become far riskier than siding with patient safety. The clinic's reputation, once his top priority, was now only salvageable if he aligned with official medical procedures. Mia witnessed the tense aftermath of the meeting and finally saw the full truth of what I'd been fighting for. She read through my compiled documentation in the break room that afternoon, her expression shifting from cautious doubt to unwavering solidarity. All the lingering distrust from weeks of miscommunication and workplace pressure dissolved in an instant. She found me after my last patient visit, her tone firm and resolute. "I'm on your side. I was stuck between policy and loyalty before, but this isn't politics anymore. This is safety. I'll back every report you've filed." Her explicit alliance finalized the shift in power inside the clinic. For weeks, I'd been isolated and outmatched, forced to stand alone against institutional pressure and targeted retaliation. Now I had internal support, legal documentation, and external medical oversight backing every choice I'd made. The balance of the war had tipped entirely in. Claire sensed the complete reversal the second she received the official external specialist notification. She stormed into the clinic unannounced mid-afternoon, abandoning her usual polished composure, her face tight with rage and desperation. She cornered me in the empty hallway, her voice low and earnest, no longer bothering with polite pretense or veil. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You have no idea who you're angling with. I've protected Senator Grady's reputation for years, and he doesn't lose. He can bury your license, ruin your career, and make sure no medical facility in Texas ever hires you again. Back off right now, or this ends with..." Her outburst ripped open the final hidden layer cover-up. The unnamed powerful figure she'd been shielding was Senator Elias Grady, the face of the state's healthcare reform campaign. His pristine public image was built on clean living, family values, and strict anti-substance abuse policies, making his private addiction exponentially more destructive if exposed. Claire's years of self-medication, professional compromise, and quiet sacrifice had all been to prop up his fraudulent public. I faced her threat without fear, my tone steadying. "I'm not backing off. You're dying slowly covering for someone else's choices. My job is to protect your life, not his reputation. The external review is official, irreversible, and beyond anyone's..." Claire's composure completely. She revealed her final desperate deploy in a frantic, rush. Senator Grady planned to flee the state for a private rehab within days, leaving her to take full public blame for the entire cover-up. Professional fallout and regulatory consequences. She had burned every bridge, ruined her health, and risked everything for a man who intended to abandon her at the first. As she stormed out of the clinic, I knew the final inevitable. All lies, political leverage, and hidden secret exposed. The staged bout of power was gone. Claire was unraveling. The senator's sod was crumbling, and every thread of the covering apart. After weeks of being hunted and powerless, I held the decisive upper hand, and the final chapter of this fight to unfold. The day of the mandatory clinic review meeting arrived faster than I expected, casting a sharp final tension over the entire clinic. No more quiet threats, no more anonymous calls, no more behind-the-scenes political maneuvering. Every loose thread from the past weeks was converging into one single, unescapable confrontation. Dr. Hale scheduled the closed-door hearing mid-morning, listing only essential attendees. Himself, Mia, me, and Claire Bennett, who arrived at the clinic dressed in a rigid, tailored blazer, her mask of poise barely clinging to her fraying composure. She walked in with a cold, hard stare, ready to paint me as a reckless, unprofessional doctor who weaponized patient care for personal obsession. The room went silent the second the door clicked shut. Dr. Hale opened the meeting formally, reciting the filed complaints, alleged boundary violations, unwarranted medical pressure, and unprofessional fixation on a high-profile patient. For the first 10 minutes, Claire spoke with calculated precision, laying out a polished narrative designed to destroy my credibility. She claimed I'd harassed her with unnecessary testing, ignored her explicit patient autonomy, and let personal paranoia interfere with clinical judgment. She wove small, harmless interactions into evidence of instability, and for a moment, I could see the old clinic bias resurface, the instinct to side with power over quiet medical truth. But this time, I was no longer defenseless. When she finished her statement, I stepped forward and laid my full, time-stamped case file across the table. Page by page, I presented irrefutable, clinic-approved evidence. Abnormal baseline liver markers, documented chronic symptom reports, repeated patient refusal of standard safety care, and official state-mandated referral logs. I spoke in calm, unrushed clinical tones, stripping away every manipulation in her narrative. I did not mention my ability to hear organ voices. I did not rely on intuition or feeling. I only spoke the documented, unarguable truth. This was never fixation, I stated firmly. This was consistent patient safety advocacy. Every follow-up, every test request, every referral aligned with state medical guidelines for at-risk patients presenting with progressive, unexplained organ decline. A patient's right to refuse testing does not erase a physician's legal and ethical duty to document risk and intervene when deterioration. Maya spoke up next, her voice steady and unwavering, officially breaking the clinic's neutrality. She confirmed my consistent professionalism, verified the authenticity of my dated notes, and testified that my concerns had always been rooted in protocol, not personal bias. Her alliance shifted the entire room. Dr. Hale, staring at the mountain of compliant paperwork and external medical filings, could no longer prioritize political favor over clinicality. Cornered and out of legitimate defenses, Claire's icy composure finally uttered. Her carefully constructed lies crumbled apart under the weight of official records, and the pressure of covering for Senator Grady broke her. In a rushed, shaky tone she'd never used before, she admitted the full truth. She confessed to mixing prescription sedatives and heavy alcohol use for months. She admitted she'd covered for the senator's worsening substance addiction, cleaning up his mistakes, absorbing his scandals, and self-medicating to keep up the facade of his clean police. She revealed he planned to abandon her to save his career, leaving her alone to take every penalty and professional. I didn't have a voice, she whispered, her voice cracking. I've spent years protecting him, and the second things get risky, he's running. I ruined my health for his reputation. The confession hung heavy in the quiet room. Every rumor, every vague threat, every hidden organ whisper I'd heard over the past weeks was now confirmed out loud, on record, in front of clinic leadership. The cover-up was no longer a secret I alone carried. It was official. Dr. Hale issued a binding clinical resolution on the spot. Claire would be required to complete court-adjacent supervised substance abuse treatment, with ongoing liver monitoring through an external medical specialist. The clinic would close all misconduct complaints against me, formally clearing my professional record of every allegation. No disciplinary action would stand. My career was safe, yet even in victory there was no euphoria. I'd won the battle, exposed the cover-up, and protect patient safety, but real. Claire's political career was effectively over. Senator Grady's carefully curated public image would collapse once the treatment records and quiet clinic disclosures circulated through state political circles. Lives and careers had been permanently altered, all from a toxic cycle of secrecy and corruption I'd been forced alone. As the meeting adjourned, and Claire walked out of her head down, defeated and exhausted, I understood the final cost of my victory. The old, quiet, risk-free life I'd loved was gone forever. I was no longer the doctor who avoided conflict from hard truths. I'd stood against power, broken a political cover-up, and professional ruin. The fight was over, but my new life and my unshackled self was only just beginning.